Well, let's cross live now to Boston and speak to the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Good to see you this morning, Mr Tice. And what's your reaction to the US-UK trade deal?
Well, first and foremost, of course, this is a glorious Brexit benefit, because if we'd still been in the EU, we wouldn't be able to have any of these negotiations. Look, it's work in progress. There's still a lot of details to come out. The whole detailed agreement is still under negotiation, but I think there are some interesting aspects to it. Obviously, it's good news for the car industry in that it reduces the short 25% tariff that was talked about. The whole car tariff thing is important to appreciate, though, because wrongly, when we were a member of the EU, was charging US car imports 10% when the US was only charging 2.5%. And that's one of the main gripes that the US has. What's happened with this agreement is that it's been settled at 10%. It would be preferable to get that down towards zero. But that's good news. It's removed the tariff on steel, for example. And then also with regard to, you mentioned just earlier the issue of farmers' concerns, but actually, this is a partial trade deal. It's not a full trade deal by any stretch of the imagination, but in a sense, it's work in progress. Something is better than nothing. So this doesn't cover hormone-treated beef that people are concerned about. It doesn't cover chlorinated chicken that people are concerned about. Frankly, probably wrongly. I mean, most of our salad is actually bagged salad is washed in chlorine. As I say, it's work in progress. Frankly, it's considerably better than the deep flaws in the Indian trade deal, which was announced on Wednesday, I think it was, when the government have conceded hugely with regard to movement of labour, where basically Indian companies can bring over Indian workers and people wouldn't have to pay Indian workers wouldn't have to pay any national insurance. Employers wouldn't have to pay any national insurance here in the UK. That's going to lead to tens and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of additional Indian workers coming into the UK and suppressing British wages and taking British jobs. That is a seriously bad deal.
There are concerns from some in the car industry, for example, that this could stifle growth. I mean, we've got this tariff reduction on 100,000 cars from the UK to the US, but that's the figure it was before. So where's the potential for growth in that?
Well, that's right. That's the quote at the moment, but that's the sort of the number that we have been exporting. So it's give or take parity. And yes, of course, you want growth and you'd like to increase that. But I guess what the Americans will want to do is to see, well, are they able to export more of their cars into the UK? As I say, the point about a trade deal, it's not fixed in cement forever. It's a continual process of review, monitoring, and negotiation. The fact that we've got the first significant deal is a good thing. I think that reflects the strength of the relationship between President Trump and obviously the likes of Nigel Farage and Trump's love for the UK, and all of that is a real positive.
I mean, the devil is in the detail, though, isn't it, Mr Tice? And do you think it could spell trouble potentially for British farmers, because the American agricultural sector is now going to have greater access to the British market?
It's going to have greater access, but the truth is the quantity of beef imports and exports are really very, very small indeed. We produce probably the finest beef in the world, frankly. So I think the opportunity to export more of our great beef to the US is fantastic. There's one other key point in this deal, which is very interesting, little commented on so far. The US are very concerned about Chinese investment in critical UK infrastructure. So are we. And it looks like the US have got a significant say in the UK receiving Chinese investment. Frankly, given the negligence of people like Boris Johnson previously, it was President Trump that forced Boris Johnson to ditch Huawei from our UK critical infrastructure. So I actually think that could be a good thing. If we can't trust our own British civil servants to protect our interests, then actually working with our US allies could be a very good thing.
I noticed you said, a lot of this has been down to the relationships with people like Nigel Farage. Yeah, admittedly, it is all going to help. Of course it is. but you've yet to praise Keir Starmer. You've yet to praise our new ambassador, Lord Mandelson. But they actually, whether you like them or not, they've done a good job, haven't they?
I haven't criticised them on this deal at all.
No, but you haven't praised them either, Richard.
Well, look, fair enough. Credit where credit's due. The irony, though, of seeing Keir Starmer lauding this trade deal. This was a man that wanted a second referendum to stay in the EU. This is a man who wanted to continue freedom of movement. So maybe he's listened and learned from Nigel and the likes of myself, us Brexiteers, who realise that actually you want to do deals and work with economies that are fast growing. And let's remember that the EU, of course, is shrinking. It's in recession, basically. And yet Starmer wants to tie us on a sort of closer regulatory orbit with the EU, and that would be a disaster. So we'll hold his feet to the fire on that.
Boris Johnson was interviewed by GB News yesterday, and in it he was asked about Reform's success at the local elections last week, and he says that Reform UK is not a threat, and he doesn't think there is going to be a Prime Minister, Nigel Farage. How do you react to that?
Well, there's certainly not going to be another Prime Minister Boris Johnson, thank God. And I think the reality is that the Tories are disappearing down a plug hole. The latest poll yesterday, with the Reform UK at 33%, the Tories down at, I think, 17%, almost behind the Lib Dems. I mean, this is an existential change, and the voters voted with their feet on the 1st of May, and they voted hugely in favour of Reform UK. We got, I think, well over 2 times the number of Labour voters. Boris Johnson, frankly, he betrayed the British people. He didn't deliver Brexit properly. And of course, he opened the doors to mass, cheap, low-skilled immigration that has had such a depressing effect on British wages, huge effect on our public services. So I think he's just a piece of history.
Yeah, you've got some work to do, though, haven't you? I mean, you'll be aware, Richard, that, I mean, we get messages sometimes. We do the government rounds and the opposition rounds every morning on the key issues of the day. And we often get people messaging saying, well, why haven't you got Reform? Why aren't Reform talking about this? Well, you've got a problem because you haven't got a Home Affairs spokesman, you haven't got a Foreign Affairs spokesman, you haven't got a Treasury spokesman, you haven't got a health spokesman. You need to, don't you? You've got to start putting in place all of these sort of structures now so that on all these issues you've got an expert who can come on and talk to us.
Well, maybe the voters have just actually demonstrated that they think our expertise, because we've been around the block a few times. I've run a multi-billion-pound multinational business, tripled the share price in just 4 years. We've got a lot more experience than anybody on the Labour front bench, anybody on the Tory front bench. That's why voters have just voted Reform. And of course, we're growing up. We're growing in size and scale. But I think at the end of the day, trust voters. Don't trust who's on which particular moment on things like Radio 4, because the voters are sick and tired of being made poorer by ludicrous ideas like mass immigration and net stupid zero. That's why we're doing so well, because we are the party of common sense. We're the party of the workers.